Hello and welcome to episode 120 of The Imperial Truth. It's just me this episode. We'll be talking about the Reckoning of Dalaan Prime, the event we put on in Cardiff very recently. Apologies for the lateness of the episode. We desperately tried, but life got in the way. I was away the weekend following the event, so it was a short period of time trying to get everything in, and we just about failed. But less of that, and we'll move on. Element Games, you can go and buy tiny planes, which if you're playing Adeptus Titanicus, well, I say tiny planes, they're scaled planes. They're pretty big, and they're quite cool if you want to use them on your Adeptus Titanicus table in particular. I want to play the game itself. The game looks cool. I really want to try and get in an actual demo of it. Fingers crossed. Well, I know a couple of the guys at the club have bought into it. I'm hoping that I can play it without having to buy any models, because only so much time, only so much money. But Element have lots of stuff up for order. You can purchase a whole host of things that you can use for your gaming. So head on over to Element Games. Use the link in the show notes, or use the links we put on social media, and help support the show. If you want to support the show in another way, then you can head over to Patreon and support the show that way. Essentially, every month you'll be charged whatever amount you want to donate, and the starts at $1 and goes up to whatever you want. If you feel that this show is worth a little bit of your cash, you want to support it. You know, we had someone for Full Stride messaging me saying they wanted to support Full Stride, wanted to order from Element. Fortunately, you can't if you're over in America. So the best way to do that otherwise would be to jump on the Patreon. It's a good little system, and it means the world, frankly, the fact that anyone would want to give me even $1, and it helps support purchasing equipment. Fingers crossed the sound's going to be a bit better this episode. Still not perfect. I had to have a play around a lot just to get this set up to vaguely work, and I'm going to need to do a little bit more playing around to make sure it's viable for the future and everything's as good as it can be. I want to apologise for the sound dropping off. It was one of those things I knew I had to get on and put off, and it wasn't until it got pretty bad after. I'm pretty sure it must have been Magnus, because Magnus is going to get the blame for everything. Knocked some dials and I didn't know where they were. My attitude to my mixer desk and to everything else is very much a tech priest's attitude to some dark age tech, in that we know it works, but we don't question how it works. We just try and say the right things, press the right buttons in the right order like we were shown. And if that fails, then it gets a bit hairy. So as I said, we've been pretty busy. We've run the event. We've come back to a studio that's full of stuff, and the wife and I went away for the weekend for a little bit on top of working and everything else. Haven't got much hobby done. We are getting closer to Company of Legends, which is my next event up in Durham, and I've got some Sisters of Silence to paint. I've got a short period of time before I have to send the list in, and then try and it's 2 lists luckily, so I can maybe try and be a bit hopeful with one of them and then guarantee the other one has all the models. But I'm going to try and get on with painting in between recording, which, I've got a few sessions of recording booked in as well, and stuff on over the weekend. It's got to happen. So I've got to clear. I think clearing this studio / hobby room is one of the major things I've got to do. I think that will help no end when it comes to getting on with stuff, being able to come in here and actually get on with stuff. So I think that might be losing an evening to clear up might actually help me moving forwards. So that's got to be done. There's going to be some Sisters about, and Sisters of Silence, sorry. I need to move some of these other painting projects out of the way while I do that, and collecting more and more of my Demon Army ready to get cracking on then as soon as I've got everything lined up, which I can't wait. The Warcry second wave is coming out at the weekend, and the beasts from the book are coming out, and the new Furies I'm definitely using in my demons, so I need to go and buy a box or two of them and probably sell on the other creatures in there. I can't see me using them; they don't really fit with the theme I've got for my my Crimson Fury demon army. And talking about Durham, going up to Company of Legends, I'm going to be travelling up on the Friday. Where I live, south of London, means that if I were to travel up on the Friday, I'd have to leave it pretty late, and I'd be getting in to Durham at way gone midnight. So it's just a case of taking days off, unfortunately, for a lot of travel for those kind of journeys. So we'll leave East Sussex nice and early to get past all the London M25 traffic, and we'll stop off at Warhammer for a few days. So I think it's the 27th, the last Friday of the month. I'll be popping into Warhammer World. If anyone's around, want to say hi, then that's cool. Obviously, I don't expect people to take time off work or anything like that, but I will be popping up. I might end up having to do some painting up there if I'm not quite finished, but I might try and take up a game of something like Titanicus, which is easy enough to take with me. We shall have to see, but I'll stop there for lunch and then early afternoon make my way up the rest of or mid-afternoon make my way up the rest of the journey to get up there and get some games of Heresy in, because it's been a while actually. I played one game a few weeks ago at the club, but running events you don't get to play, so yeah, it'd be nice to get 5 games in and maybe some other gaming in over that weekend as well. And always good to not be at an event and having to do stuff means I get to just put my feet up and chill out. And yeah, if Michael and Graham and the guys need help, then I'm available to come and help and set tables up if that's required. But yeah, the ability to just sit back, relax, not have to worry about people coming up to me asking me when's lunch, what time's this, what time's that. And the good thing about Company of Legends is everything is done on site, so apart from a trip to the local big Tesco's to get some stuff in for the weekend, I'm pretty much going to be on site all week. Everyone's there. You're not worried about, or people aren't worried about the timings of going off to get food, because the guys there provide food. And I love the event. It's got a very good reputation. It sells out very quickly. They just put tickets up for the March event for next year, and they sold out very quickly. Broke the computer system, broke the interwebs. Managed to get mine, so yeah, I'll be looking forward to that one as well. Particularly seeing as I can't be at Adepticon, and it's the same time, if not the same week. So yeah, really looking forward to that. Looking forward to heading up to Warhammer World as well. Usually meet up with some of the people I know up there, and that's always good. Stop off and have a drink at Bugman, see what's going on. Say hello to a few people. It's one of the better road trips that we have or that I have for Heresy Gaming. And while we're talking about events, tickets for Blood and Glory, the Heresy event, the 2-day Heresy event, are up. The pack should be up fairly soon if it's not already. The overall narrative, I'm going to try and get something sorted for that very soon. I can only apologise. This is been manic for the guys running it and everything else. We're going to have a good time. It's going to be fun. There are 20 odd tickets left, I think, something like that. The Adeptus Titanicus tickets should be going up very soon for the 2-day event. Hopefully, again, we can fill that out. I need to work out exactly how we're working that with spare player and stuff, but I think we're covered. We should be. So that I'm really looking forward to that. That's the first weekend of November. So, yeah, can't wait for that. We've already learnt lessons for next year if it's going to go ahead about what we do and how we do it. So this process is all, none of us are professional event planners or anything like that. We've done events that have gone well in the past, but obviously changing circumstances make some things difficult and some things more challenging. So we take that on board for next time, and hopefully, when we get to the event, the guys who've come previously have all had a cracking time. So it should be the same. if we have a look at what Forge World, we've actually got a release from Forge World. It's a big one. I'm not sure how many people will be jumping on it. The Custodes have their second flyer, the Legio Custodes Ares gunship is the term. So yeah, we've already got, this is the second version of the big guy they've already got. I think it's fantastic. The rules may not be as good. I think we worked out last time, but it has the opportunity to take some real damage if you can shoot it in the rear. But I think I prefer it as looking wise anyway. There's particularly I don't know. There's something about it. It's weird. It's one of those things where sometimes I look at it and think, really, do I prefer it? But yeah, I think I do. So it's a funny looking thing. But as I say, at what is it? £289. Sorry. Don't know where I got that other figure from. Maybe that's dollars. £289. It's a chunk of money. Maybe Chris Mills will get one. I think we'll all be disappointed if he doesn't, seeing as he's got the Orion. It's one of those ones. I'm not sure. It's going to be a long way off for me ever getting one. My Custodes are only just starting. Yeah, maybe we'll see them on the table soon. But that's been it for Heresy releases in that respect. We have had the Nova Open preview seminar that went up a couple of weeks ago, and obviously there's nothing heresy in that specifically, but there are a couple of things that might be of interest. We've got the kind of preview of the next Necromunda gang, the Hellmore gang. There's a picture going around online where someone's basically really brightened up the picture, and it looks like it's the Khorne, a Khorne gang that was teased at the Heresy and Necromunda Weekender. And obviously we know how good the Necromunda models can be if you're using them for militia, stuff like that. There's a lot of potential in there to play around. So fingers crossed there's going to be something there for us. And then one that's slightly more kind of out there maybe is, I don't know how much of a range we're going to get. We certainly haven't seen it all. It's for Age of Sigmar. It's what are they called? The Ossiarch Bone Reapers. And these are kind of undead constructions. But there are these guys in there who are a little bit of a cross between like Necron Warriors and Tyrannid. What are the ones with the forearms? The classic... I can't remember the names. Either way, they're four-armed. They've been in the General Kenobi meme already. But if you're doing demons, there's some opportunities with some of these models, I think. Maybe not. There's only 2 or 3 of this line, but I could foresee someone having some crazy ideas with those. As I say, not a huge amount, but the character piece they've shown off is... we talk about Games Workshop doing some great models now. Yeah, it might not be the aesthetic that a lot of Heresy players are looking for, but fantastic models. But the what are they called? Necropolis Stalkers, or essentially they're four legendary warriors fused into one. So they've got 4 heads and things like that, and 4 arms with swords in each arm. And there's something a little bit Necron-y and Tyrannid-y about them. So the Tyrannid warriors, that's the dudes. But I can see there's something cool in there to play around with. So it might be something that people are interested in. And then the final piece was just the announcement that Warhammer Heroes is coming back now. Frankly, I assumed it would. They've done it for a couple of years now. I didn't think they'd be stopping. But Warhammer Heroes, just as a reminder, is Games Workshop's way of honouring those people in the community who have gone above and beyond. And I think it's something they should be doing. And I think it's something that is worth mentioning. So this isn't going live yet. Nominations will open on November the 28th, 2019. So we're a little way off. But it's something... Well, actually, I was looking to see who... the previous nominees, if I could find out why they've been nominated, and I couldn't find anything official, and maybe I've just missed it, but I don't seem to remember them announcing anything. there are certain people on where it's obvious. Carl Tuttle from the Independent Characters didn't get it for his podcasting, I'm sure. He got it for basically being the focal point for getting models out to people who lost their homes in the wildfires in California. And GW jumped on that and helped out with a paint session on Warhammer TV, and they sent models over as well as some painted stuff over as well. And that was a huge task, and Carl was kind of like the focal point, and in his group took that on board really well as well. So Carl got his for that rather than that. The guys who run some of the Food Hammer things in Canada, there are people who got it for podcasting. Dave Witek got it because he was one of the pretty much like the real shining light of Age of Sigmar, when a lot of people had jumped out and podcasts had disappeared, and it was a bit of a kind of a wild west, a bit of a barren landscape, and Dave was there still producing and being being honest with what he thought, but being a link between a community that maybe wasn't there and GW, and did that off his own back. And there's lots of other people around America, around Europe and the world who've got these things. It would be nice to be able to go on there and read why, but certainly, just because you produce a podcast every 2 weeks doesn't mean you deserve one of these. I absolutely agree with that. These are people who've gone a little bit further. A lot of these have given up a lot of their time and put a lot of energy and effort into doing whatever they're doing for the greater good of the community. And the good thing is the decision on whether to give these awards out is not given based on weight of applications that people write in. It's given on quality rather than quantity. So Games Workshop, it's a way of making sure they control who they give it to, because let's be honest, they're not going to give it to some people who, if you do a podcast and you're always a little bit negative towards GW, the chances are you're not going to get one. You never know. They might do that for one or two of those people, but I wouldn't necessarily expect that unless they really were doing great work within the community as well. But it would have to be something pretty good, I think, to overcome all that. But I think most of us actually know someone that we think possibly deserves one of these. I was talking to someone a little while ago on another podcast about a gentleman who's been supportive of a lot of things that go on in the wider heresy. Someone who's been generous with time and money, and I don't know this person. I'm not involved in their group. I don't think I've ever met them. I've had some very kind of tangential connection to them in terms of being around stuff that they've done, seeing little bits they've done, and I'm talking to a couple of people to say, actually, do you think they deserve? Because I'm not part of that group. Do you think they deserve this? Do they? Aside from what I've seen, what else do they do for their community? Is it worth promoting them? Because as far as I can tell, just looking, there's no one specifically heresy involved that I've seen get one of these awards yet. And that, I don't know why. Maybe they're only going to give so many out at any one point. So just because there's no one involved doesn't mean they haven't considered it and are thinking that down the line that person deserves something. But they're not going to give out 100 of these every year. They're giving out, a dozen or however many it is that they feel is necessary. But I feel like we have people in this community that do great work, bearing in mind, much like the old Lord of the Rings community, we are not getting the same kind of attention that Warhammer, that Age of Sigmar and 40k get, and there are people out there producing events or going out their way to set up gaming nights or going out their way to give up their time to allow people to learn how to play the game, that kind of thing. That that's immeasurable when you have a community like ours, I believe. There are people out there doing good charity work. There's people giving up their time and effort and energy to help other people within our community. And I mean by our community, I mean the heresy community. And there are people out there who are utilising the heresy community to do good outside of that as well. And I think that maybe those people won't get chosen. But I hope that some of those people do get nominated this year, and they may have been nominated previously. I completely understand GW aren't going to contact everyone who's been nominated and say you've been nominated, and they're certainly not going to put out a list of that kind of stuff either. So we don't know unless we ask. But I'm going to put a challenge out there that you have a think, and maybe it is a case of you know wherever you are. You don't know anyone specifically who fits that, and that's cool, you know. I don't expect a person who runs 2 events a year to get a nomination necessarily, because lots of people do that. These are for Warhammer Heroes. These are for the people who've gone that extra mile. And, you know, that by dint of going an extra mile, it means there aren't hundreds of thousands of these people. So it would be cool just to get some of those ones that we kind of get some heresy attention in there. So maybe think about it. And let's face it, if you know someone in the Age of Sigmar, the 40k community, in the Lord of the Rings community, Adeptus Titanicus, whatever community is, send that in as well. I'm not sitting here thinking we should go and smash it all with heresy stuff. No, but maybe just some representation would be really nice. And some idea from GW about why these people have got these awards. You see these faces and you think, there was someone in the last set who... I know the face, seen them at plenty of events. I have no idea what aspect of their hobby and their involvement got them this award, because I don't obviously know that aspect of them, and I probably never will unless I ask them now. But now I know they're there, I might ask them. So yeah, it'll be nice to see. And then finally, in the start, I listened to the latest episode of the Geno 5.2 podcast. These guys have been doing some heresy podcasting for a few years now. Good guys, running the Tarsus events, putting a lot of work in. Life's been getting in the way, it's fair to say, of their podcast. They've been quite quiet for it recently. They've also found some other game systems, which I think a lot of people have. There's so much cool gaming available, and they put out their latest show to say they're actually changing their show, and they're coming from a heresy focused show to a general gaming podcast, and just wanted to say, thanks guys. It's hard to keep putting out the content when I think Tom's working, traveling a lot for work, and they've got kids, and as I say, they're playing lots of different game systems. There's a definite urge here. This is the reason why I have Adeptus Titanicus podcast and Fanatic, which we'll be having some episodes soon, is because there's a desire there to talk about what you love, and there's a real love of a lot of different things. So I just wanted to put it out there to say thank you, Geno 5.2, for most of the shows you've done. I'll ignore a couple, don't worry. They'll probably know which ones I mean on that one, but it's all tongue-in-cheek. But they provided some good listening, and as I say, their work for their Tarsus events has been fantastic. So all the best with Geno 5.2 and its new guys going forwards. I'll be listening because I enjoy most of Tom talking, and I play most of the games they'll be playing as well. But yeah, I'm going to leave it. We're going to go for some music, and then we're going to come back and talk of the Reckoning of Dalaan Prime. Well, let's talk about the Reckoning of Dalaan Prime. This is the event that I ran over the bank holiday weekend in Cardiff, ably assisted by the good lady wife, Mrs. Truth, and Rob Ing, who's been on the show and helps manage the social medias and all of that jazz. This event was set up a little bit differently from previous events that I've run. We had an open kind of system of allowing games of Adeptus Titanicus, Centurion, Zone Mortalis and Frontline 30k to occur hopefully relatively smoothly within one setting under one event, and all feeding into the narrative of that event. The principle being that the standard game would be a 3K 30, frontline 30K game, but if you had bought written lists or wanted to play in these other styles, you could. So we had a couple of Zone Mortalis boards set up. We didn't set anything specifically up for Centurion, but people could choose to add in a bit more. And for Centurion as well, to me now, Centurion is a game style rather than a set of rules. The original Centurion rules are very cool. I've modified mine. I've seen other people do the same as well. So I think certainly in my vocabulary, a Centurion represents a style of game rather than a list of rules in there that harkens back a little bit to the original idea was to harken back to second edition, and that's why I've added in allowing things like the odd rhino into the list. I don't think it changes Centurion a huge amount, bearing in mind what you can bring in a Centurion list. I think having a rhino or two is not a major issue personally. And then Zone Mortalis is always a bit of fun, and people don't always get to play it. And we had effectively two Zone Mortalis tables, as I said. One provided by Peter and Ozzy Lennon. They use their own. They bought some MDF stuff and put it on the Necromunda tiles, which are laid out exactly the same as the Forge World Zone Mortalis tiles. And then Dark Fantastic Mills sponsored the event. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the terrain painted up. I will be using it at future events and be shouting them out. That the stuff is really good, and we set up. I probably need to buy a little bit more for a 4x4 board size, but the prices are extremely reasonable, so I'm not adverse to doing that. We had that set up as well. And then, of course, Adeptus Titanicus is intrinsically linked to Heresy Gaming. So, and there's a big crossover with the gamers as well. So we had some terrain set up for that. Matt Woodsmith bought his terrain, which was better than my terrain, and we didn't have many players, so we ended up just using that, which was cool. Overall, so this kind of thing has been done before. I'm not the only person to do it by any stretch. Particularly, I think over in Oz, where they have some of their more free-form events, where it's a period of time and people choose what kind of games, when to game, how to game, and everything else. And it works really well within that kind of remit. When I'm running my events, there can be, the weekend meant, the dates meant that it wasn't a huge amount turn up, but I've run 360 plus events, and we sold 92 for London GT as well. So there's a chance that there's a lot of people coming to an event that I run. So I have to be mindful this system has to work, but also when people are paying, in this case, it was £40 a ticket, that I give people the opportunity to play 5 games of Warhammer. That's essentially what they've paid to play. So I feel my events have to have a structure, an event structure in terms of providing those 5 games, and therefore having time restrictions and things like that have to be in place. And that's not to knock the open style at all, but for what the events that I've run, in the venues I've run them, the way they have to be run, I feel that's the right move. If you just hire a hall and you are providing your own terrain and everything else, you've got hall costs or what have you, you have much, you can certainly do it. You could probably do it on one of these events, but with the extra time that you can have, say Company of Legends could do it, because the venue, people are there for the whole weekend, and it would allow people to be, choose when they go to the bar, choose when they play games. You could play late night, all that kind of thing. Firestorm shuts at whatever time it shuts at, 7 o'clock or what have you. Then, you've got that limited time period. People can't be in the middle of games it doesn't really work. So I feel that structure is something I'm going to keep going, with the idea being that if we did have people turning up wanting to play the different game styles, then they could go to a table and see what their opponents got and say, okay, we're on this table. would you like to play a game of Centurion, or would you like to go over to the Adeptus Titanicus table and play that? The real key there would be that I run grudges, and the idea being that anyone can come up to me. Usually I want both people to do it because sometimes there are miscommunications, etc. But I would have people come up to me and say, we want to play each other at some point this weekend, whether it's game one. If someone came up to me before the event and said, I want to play these 5 games through the event, these 5 people have all agreed, here's their agreements, then that's fine for me. That person is having fun at my event, and that's the most important bit. There might be the odd occasion where I kind of said I can do 3 or 4 of them, but in theory I would like to be able to say yes in that instance. And that way I had lists of what people could play, what people had with them and were willing to play. I was hoping that we would get every round people saying, I want to play Zone Mortalis. This guy's got Zone Mortalis. I'll go and walk over to that person, say, do you want to play Zone Mortalis against me? Cool, let's go and tell Greg, that kind of thing. And we had a few instances of that. We had Matt Woodsmith, as I say, came along, my co-host on Full Stride podcast. He came along and he was wanting to play 5 games of Adeptus Titanicus. It didn't quite happen. We didn't have a huge amount of people. We had a couple of people who were struggling to bring everything with them. That's another thing to take into account when you're offering a lot of different systems. Some people are having to get the train or what have you. It's not as easy to carry all the stuff we need to play on, if you're not driving. So something else to take into consideration. But we had a few people challenging friends specifically or new people that they wanted to play them. And then the odd one of those was also, hey, I want to play Zone Mortalis, and then me putting a call out to see if anyone wanted to play. So it worked to a very small percentage of how I would want it to work. But, I've tried it. Immediately, it showed up some issues. We can go into those in a bit. First thing, it means you have to have scenarios. If you're doing scenarios, you have to have those scenarios ready for all those games. I think we talked before on the show, we have a limited number of set scenarios, and we have all these black books with loads of different scenarios in, but there's a lot of ones of those which are definitely asymmetrical. And then we have the fact that some armies benefit or are hindered a lot more by those campaign-style scenarios as well. So here I'm having to, with Adeptus Titanicus, with Matt there, who knows the game well, who I can explicitly trust to be able to run a game, kind of take charge of that as well. And we had a couple of players who were maybe more new to Adeptus Titanicus than he was. I allowed them to use the match play rules for that. I still think it works fairly well for Adeptus Titanicus, but also particularly for we have one guy who is newer to the game, and it allows them to learn the game in a more kind of measured way, I suppose is the best way of putting it. There's no need to throw loads of random scenario stuff at someone when they're not as confident with the game as maybe others are. So there's that to think about. Of the 30k, Zone Mortalis and Centurion, luckily Centurion can work with some of the frontline missions, and that can be fine. And then I'm going to provide missions for Zone Mortalis as well. So there's a bit more upkeep, a bit more book work to do with running multiple systems at once. And bear in mind, Rob was my spare player who played 2 or 3 games. My good lady wife, bless her, she knows a limited amount about hobbying. So it's on me to organise all that, and that's fine. That's cool. Again, I'm not the best organised person, but you're tripling your workload, basically. And when you bear in mind you're trying to do that all within a narrative as well, that becomes even more tricky. There are lots of things that can be done well with it. I didn't have the time, the pre-organisation to make the most of that. So I think that's something looking forwards that all ties into this multi-system event thing. It makes it tricky. And I'll get into kind of ways we can deal with that in a minute as well. Part of all that multi-system gaming is you have to, put it this way. I wasn't going to ask people to write 4 lists for 4 different styles of play. and send them to me for checking, or even putting them up online. I haven't got the time. It's not going to happen. We had 28, I think, players, maybe 26 turned up, a couple of dropouts. If 40 odd, even for that, it's a lot. If 40 odd, 50, 60 people have turned up, there's no way that's going to happen. So I'm allowing people to not write lists and bring what they want and then write lists on the day. I did ask people to maybe prepare some lists, and we had some of that, which was good. The other side of that is, and I said this right at the start of the weekend to people, if you get to the table and it's clear that your lists are mismatched in a way, you bought all infantry and your opponent's got knights, then talk about it. Say, actually, mate, I really don't think I can't deal with any of your army. Can we meet in the middle? Shall I get some more tough bits out? Do you want to tone yours down a bit? How do you want to do this? Also, within that, I put it forward right at the start. Let's talk, have an expectation of the type of game you want to play. Hi, mate, how you doing? Yeah, oh, yeah, I'm really casual. I like to blah, 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 blah. All right, cool. Yeah, I can see your army list is, you've taken units that fit the theme really well and And actually, I've taken lists. My list is a bit more kind of honed, not honed to the top, but actually these are quite a powerful unit. This is quite a powerful unit. The other player might say at that point, actually, I think this is more powerful than you think it is, or oh yeah, cool, no worries. I tell you what, I've got this unit to bring in. I can match up against you a little bit, and that way both players are on. They're in the game in the right way. Now, you don't always have to do that. I encouraged it because sometimes it can help. Sometimes it's not needed at all. It also gets people talking, and I think it's always an overlooked thing. People assume that, and there's certainly an attitude in Heresy that us Heresy players are much more mature and do much. We're much better at this hobby thing than a lot of other people. A lot of us have done it for a long time. Sometimes we forget those things. Sometimes some people aren't very good at those things. Sometimes you need that icebreaker. And I'm certainly not like I know people who are very good at reaching across the table, shaking the hand, saying hello, building up a rapport before the game starts. Sometimes I'm not that person. I'm an introvert at the end of the day. I need that recharge time. There are times when I'm like, I don't want to be the person talking, crazily enough, but I don't want to be reaching out. I don't want to be engaging on that level. We can play the game fine without having to do all that beforehand. And you know what? Sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it really does help a game. And in fact, as well, sometimes it's in doing that, you're looking at the scenario. There was a couple of times I walked around the table, halfway through turn one, we played one of the funkier scenarios, and the people looked at me, two players on the table, like, this game's not going to work for us. And I'm like, okay, cool. And one player's gone, well, I can do this. And I'm like, yeah, if that sounds like it could work. And then I came around a little while later and they said, actually, what we've decided to do together is we've ignored this part of it and we've decided to do this, and we're going to play this game and have fun. And I'm like, perfect. And that's exactly what I want. Although there's nothing wrong with going to the table and playing the game as it is and using your army as it is. I'm not suggesting that you have to change your army all the time, but I was trying to encourage a bit more dialogue there because I think it can only help us. Unfortunately, one of the big things for having no lists is what I like to do, and one of the more balancing features that I've utilised previously is having special rules thrown out onto tables. Now, that is something that is not easy to get right. You can easily underestimate or overestimate the power of a rule, and particularly if you don't play an army and it's slightly quirky, it's very easy to get wrong. So over time I've thrown in things like kind of dust storms that interfere with knights' saving throws. We've had Zardulac completing a ritual, sacrificing himself many, many, many times in an event to weaken Legio Custodes forces across tables. Things like that, which can just knock off the edge off a more powerful list and make it easier to match people up to have good games with. The problem with multi-lists or no lists and people being able to choose is I can choose a rule and the player can choose to play a different list that So we had an all jet bike Emperor's Children army at the event, and there's definitely aspects of that army which are hard for some armies to deal with. Unfortunately, I think he had other models with him, and all the point. And there's no complaint about the guy at all, because he played the game, and I can tell you now, everyone seemed to have fun against the gentleman. But I'm looking at his army, saying, well, if I put this rule in, I don't know what army he's picking out next time. So it's either irrelevance or actually impinges his fun. So it becomes harder to balance those games out a little bit, and that's something I like to try and do. So that didn't work for me in this event. On top of all that, you've got the various issues of, so a lot of the time someone might have a specific army they want to play, so they bring one list's worth of forces. They might not have more than one list worth of forces. They might have painted specifically to get up to legal for this event, and on the other side of that, you can have people who not through willing to gain an advantage, but they choose different units for different fights, and sometimes that can imbalance a game. So, I'm fighting Mechanicum today. I just happen to have all these weapons like heavy bolters and autocannons, which happen to be really good. And they're taking it for a theme kind of thing, but it also has that effect of unbalancing the game the other way. Some people might do that on purpose. Some people might kind of do that with good intentions as well. So those kind of things can come in. Again, can that system work? Yes, absolutely. I think it also works more with the freeform kind of event that I was talking about that my events won't ever be. So while other people might find more value than that, I think I will always go now with one or two lists. 2 lists at least allows someone to bring a list that they know might have major issues, really struggle in quite a few circumstances, be able to still bring that and then have a backup list for when they have to face something they know they can't beat. So that's definitely an option moving forwards. When you go back and link that all into having this multi-system game event, I think there's an element with sometimes, and certain people particularly, that people like to be told what they're doing, and when faced with too many options, they just stick to the norm. Because in this case, the standard, the norm, the default choice was frontline gaming, and I think there were periods where people were just like, I'll just keep it simple and stay how I was. Sometimes I feel that when you put the hand up and say, does anyone want to do this? Everyone's like, no, I'm all right. I'm happy. I know where I am with this. So that's maybe something as well as part of that gaming going forwards that, that detracts from that. Not to say it's a bad thing, not to say it can't work. It certainly can work. As I say, if I was, I think there was in Oxford that they do their own little gaming weekend every now and then in a hotel. If that's one of those ones where you've got access to that room all day and all night, I think that's a perfect venue for it. I haven't seen what the Australians do. I know they've had the board up. You do need then a system which links those games together in a way, and they do a very good job in Australia by all accounts. The events, the iHorus guys particularly, the events they're part of, because I don't know exactly who runs what all of those. I also think you need more than one person running an event to do that, which is something that we're looking at going forwards. Scenarios, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I want more scenarios, more base scenarios. Yes, I need to go through that black book again and look at more. Yes, I need to go through Age of Sigmar and look at what we can steal, maybe 40k. There are elements that can be stolen and changed to work in 30k. I really think GW, Forge World could be providing that for us. I would, if anyone at Forge World is listening, I implore you, please greenlight a missions book. It would sell really well. We have effectively 6 missions in those red books. A lot of people don't buy the black books. There's no need for the older legions. There's no need to buy those black books. And having that content in there is fine. They're also campaign-driven scenarios, so most of them aren't completely fair and even, and that's great. but having more variety. You look at Age of Sigmar and 40k now, how many scenarios, even Warcry, how many scenarios there are. Even if they released a pack of cards like the open play decks for Age of Sigmar 40k, Warcry uses them, where they have terrain setups and they have various missions, and then they have things that affect the game in there as well. Would be really good, would breathe more life into our hobby, and maybe if they don't do it, maybe that's something we need to look at. But I just feel being an official thing would carry so much gravitas with it, and would really help. And we talked there, a lot of those things come across as negatives. They're learning points, I think. There are more. Don't organise your event on a bank holiday weekend. In the UK, it's a time that gets taken up by families. There are also, particularly summer bank holiday weekend, we have Reading and Leeds Festival. We have live action roleplay, big live action roleplay events going on that drag people away. Choices and choices. If you're booking up an event, if you're booking up any venue, particularly a gaming venue like Firestorm, it's already set up there. Book early. Get your pack out early if you can, because you're given more choice. I was lumped with having 2 or 3 weekends to choose from, and this was the only weekend that really worked for me. Let's say last time we were in Cardiff, I think we had 60 people. We had 28, 26, and I had a number of people saying, "Nope, not going to happen that weekend. It's this is going on, that's going on, far too much going on." So definitely look at your dates and get in there early if you can. Also, prepare for your event. So I ran this event the same way I ran Blood and Glory last time, same way I ran another event before that, and fired up the laptop on like the Wednesday night before, started to get all ready, had issues with the program I was using, couldn't work out how to fix them. I'm still not sure that I was necessarily doing anything wrong. I think it was one of those weird things, but it was too late to kind of sort out. And it slightly affected the game. Luckily, with the numbers we had, it wasn't as much of an issue. I think had we had more numbers, I would have been much more prepared in running that anyway. And it's something I have to look at for Blood and Glory now, because I have to make sure it's all working when you've got 60 people at an event compared to 28 or 26, whatever it was. You can't get away with certain things. I have to be a bit more organised. So having that done, ready, knowing it's going to work to a point. I still had problems with Blood and Glory. One of the rounds went really skew for no reason last time. Maybe I have to find a new program to run it. Unfortunately, for what I want the program to do, which is mainly the main thing I want to be able to do, is set my matchups where I want to. And I use WarScore online, and it's a good free resource. And it does the things I want it to do if you know what you're doing generally. So I can go in and every single matchup I can manually pick if I wish to, or I can have it pick those matchups based on a whole host of different options. So it's very useful for me in the way I do things. However, I had issues this time, mainly my fault, I believe. I need to go and play with it. These are little things that you need to think about when at an event. I had printer issues again, which is like the third event in a row I've had printer issues. Really strange. We end up, luckily, the venue have a printer, and we could send some files to them and get stuff printed off. Eventually got the printer sorted out on day 2. But again, that's something that can really derail you if you're relying on that kind of stuff. I don't know how their TV system works up there. Again, I could have played with that more. I'm not that technically minded in that respect anymore. So have that practice period, have that run through, if you will, before an event. If you're going to run one, that's the other thing I learned. So in the next few months, I'm going to be playing around with stuff, trying to make sure that it all goes smoothly. But in saying that, I've talked a lot about things that didn't quite work out or sound like negatives. Weirdly, there were a few things. One of the first things that surprised me was we had 3 people come and visit the event. One of them is a listener, and I cannot remember his name, and I do apologise to you. Travelled up on the train for a short journey up, not inconsiderable journey up on the train to come and look around the event, because they getting into listen to the show, and wanted to come and see what was going on, and that was really cool. Most events, are going to be fine with you doing that. sometimes it'll be worth contacting them. We're at Firestorm. It's a public venue. People can come in, so that's never going to be a problem. You can go into Element Games and walk around and have a look and Firestorm and wherever you are in that respect. If it's a hired hall or something, maybe it's worth asking first, can I pop up and have a look around? But we had Matt Murphy-Kane from painter extraordinaire, Forge Well painter. He's painted the Sons of Horus you see in the first book and all that kind of thing, all Horus himself. He came down with his missus and had a look round, knew the event was going on, and decided to pop in and have a look around, and that was really cool as well. A real surprise, no contact in saying they were going to do it, and had a bit of a chat whilst the games were going on before we had a look and see what was going on. And then Emma, for the Emma-pura on Instagram. I didn't realise this was who it was. I follow her on Instagram. Miles had someone come in and talk to him while he was playing. And I said afterwards, was that a customer? Because I thought they were talking shop. And it was like, it's Emma, blah, blah, blah. I was like, cool. Well, they obviously knew via Miles that the event was going on, came in, looked around, took some photos of the armies and was looking at some of the really well-painted stuff. Again, fantastic. People are more than welcome to come and look around my events. Blood and Glory, as I say, in Derby will be, it's free to enter that venue. So if you want to come and have a look, particularly if you're someone who's never been to an event before and you've been thinking about it, then, one of the best ways to kind of get a feel for things is to go and look, go and try it first. See if that's an environment where you can be. See if you maybe start talking to people. It can be a good way of those first introductions, walking around, having a look. There's no pressure on you in that way to be across the table. But then the next time you're at an event, maybe you know someone who's going. So, it can be a really useful little tool there. So I thoroughly recommend it. It was really nice, really pleasing, a real pleasant surprise to have as well. So, And then at the event itself, we had a number of people who hadn't played many events or any events. So all of a sudden we had a group of 4 guys who came up. They all play each other, but they hadn't, as far as I'm aware, if I remember correctly, they hadn't really gone to an event, but they came up and loved it by all accounts. But they seem to be having fun all the time, for sure. And not just them, there were a couple of other people as well who hadn't been to many events. A couple of them, we had Marcus message on Crusade and Heresy, I think, actually saying, what do I do for my first, I'm going to my first event, etc. And came along and seemed to enjoy it. And it came out for the meal with us on the Saturday night. And I know from what I was aware, his opponents had good fun games against him. He seemed to enjoy it. It was really nice to have that ability to be able to say these people came to my event and went home and had fun, and I think, as far as I can tell, were excited to go to events, whether they're mine or not. Like, this is not all about me pushing my events. My events are my events, great, whoop. There are plenty of other people running events that are just as good, if not better. So encouragement to attend events is what we're after at the end of the day. I want to, or not even that, like, for people to feel that they can attend events and enjoy them, so that they have opportunity to do that where they thought they might not before. I think it's really, really good to see, and again was a massive bonus from something that wasn't necessarily expected. And overall, we didn't have a huge amount of players, but every event I've run, pretty much think every event I've run, at some point that weekend, and sometimes more than others, as you sit behind, particularly as you sit behind the computer and people are talking about their own games and what's been going on through the event, you overhear stuff. People tend to forget that you're there or what have you, and it's not a problem at all. But you hear the odd story of, the game did a bit of this, or that player, I'm not sure I'd want to play him again because of X, Y, Z. And sometimes it's just styles of game. Sometimes it's just an approach to the rules. Sometimes it's because there's a mismatch in expectations. And And sometimes it's because people are people, and they can come across as dicks sometimes, even if they're not. Sometimes they are. This was the first event I've run where I haven't heard a single grumble. There were a couple of armies at that event which were certainly more powerful than the others. One of those armies, let's say the Emperor's Children Army, that was a guy who was talking to everyone, was happy as Larry. Everyone was enjoying games against him. And I've always said enjoying games is 90-odd%. It's 90% player, 10% list. I played some of my most fun games against lists that were really hard nuts to crack. Someone like Ben Greaves is a good example of this. At various points, he's taken some pretty powerful lists. However, he's been winning best sports or got plenty of best sports votes at events. So, they don't necessarily correlate that tough list, bad player, that kind of thing. But it was really nice to hear the positive side of things. Because again, if you have a good game, you don't always talk about it. Unless it's an exceptional game. I was hearing a lot of good chat about games. And that's really good to see. That's something we want on this podcast to promote. I really feel that that's important for the hobby. I've talked before about kind of the way we act on the tabletop. I listened to, I can't remember if I've told you this or not, but I've listened to a podcast called The Best General. And this podcast is a 40k podcast about a guy's quest, his year-long journey to win his home event, the Atlanta GT, I think it was. Can't really remember now. He sets out to, competitive 40k. And for whatever you think on that, that's fair enough. That's what he wants to do. That's cool. The way he talks with him and his group is essentially, it's about being proactive with the way we behave, sportsmanship. And there was one episode particularly where he got ETC judges on for 40k. Now, 40k, maybe particularly from the 30k side of things, 40k has a bad rep at the top end. When people say 40k, some people come up with images of, nudging models with glasses to move them closer, fudging dice. We've had big instance recently of people fudging dice, moving models with glasses, calling for turns to be over because someone's done something slightly out of sequence in order to move the game along quickly, and basically poor sportsmanship. Not cheating sometimes. Some of those are cheating, some of them aren't, but certainly lesser sportsmanship. The win at all cost attitude. Now, I think that's actually pretty overblown from the outside. Yes, there are instances of that. Yes, there are a lot of 40k players. So let's not pretend that everyone does that. But this ETC judge was on talking about how he changed the way they judged at the ETC, which is one of those. So the ETC is basically the World Cup of Warhammer, European Team Championships. Teams from all around the world, despite the name of European, come to play teamed Warhammer of 6 or 8 players, depending on the system you're playing, compete the scores and basically get a World Cup of Warhammer. England won both Age of Sigmar and 40k this year. There were instances, particularly in 40k, as teams got docked points for actual cheating, but there were also instances all the time where rules are pushed to their limits. And this judge was talking about things like someone putting something down out of sequence, for instance. In 40k, if you deep strike, if you bring stuff in off the table, you do that at the end of your movement phase. However, sometimes you want those models to find out where, how you can move stuff around. And then if you leave them there, your opponent can say, well, you've left them on the table. That's the end of your movement phase. Obviously not really in the spirit of things, of game playing per se, but within the rules of them. And these judges are very active in saying, you have two choices here. You can enforce the rules or you can play by the spirit. If you enforce the rules, there will be consequences. And in cases where no, I wish to enforce the rules, okay, here's a yellow card, 2 yellow cards, you're out, as far as I'm aware. But certainly you're going to get a penalty, even though you are technically correct. This is something that I'm moving more towards. I think we can all be, and I don't think as a group 30k we pride ourselves, I think, on our sportsmanship. I think we could do more as a group, not necessarily individuals, but I think we could do more. And this is something that I'm thinking of with these guys. When the idea is that on these top tables, and they talk about it on the Best General podcast, when you move something up, I think most of us have done it. You moved something on the opposite side, your opponent's side of the table, and when you've got to the charge phase, you've forgot to charge it because it's completely away from the rest of the battle and you've forgotten it's there. And the principle being that these guys are pushing, and we're talking about on the Best General, is, of course, you would charge there. Why wouldn't you charge there? That's what you wanted to do. You told me that. Let's not, I got you. That's not the way I want to play Warhammer. And I think that's, that's people talking about tournaments who have something riding on the event. And there's some of these American events, there's good money. There's Adepticon a few years ago, they almost gave away a car for the first prize. The only reason they didn't was because you'd have to pay the tax to drive it away. So instead there was a trip to Mexico and a few $1,000s worth of prizes. There's decent amounts of money for what's going on. So we're talking about that kind of thing. When I combine that with there was a cricket game between England and another country in disabled cricket a couple of years ago, and England needed one more wicket to win, and the other team needed a handful of runs, essentially as tight a game as you can get. And England got the last batsman out, and everyone was like, caught out, he's hit the ball and been caught out. One player on the England team said he didn't hit that. It's not out. You have umpires to make these decisions, obviously, but that one player stood there and said he's not out, and the captain turned around to him and said, "What did you say?" And he said, "It's not out." "Are you sure it's not out?" He said, "Yeah, I'm absolutely positive it's not out. I don't want to win that way." And his captain backed him up, and they asked the umpires to reverse that decision on that pitch, and they ended up winning anyway, but they could have lost that game. But that attitude, that quote of "I don't want to win that way," I kind of want to run as my new mantra, and maybe a new mantra for the show. And when I've been thinking about this a lot from listening to the General's podcast, the Best General, and listening to sport and seeing what's been happening in sport recently. In cricket, we just had the World Cup, and we've had instances of absolute brilliant sportsmanship on all sides, to be honest. This event seemed to encompass that a little bit. There was, unless I missed it, there were no issues. There were people, as I said in the scenarios, when talking about the scenarios, there were people saying, if we play this scenario, I will win this game and it won't be fun. So can we change the scenario, please? And that is a very simple thing to do. And some of you may have done it at various events. That is a great starting point. That is a great bedrock for how we do things. And it might not always be possible to change. But to approach the event organizer and say, we're not going to have a game here, so I don't want to run him over. Can we change things to make it more even? In the same instance that if I'm playing against someone and they've forgotten to charge their assault marines because they're the wrong side of the table, and we've started moving to the combat phase, or even beyond that, not too far because you can't go back a million miles. But if I turn around and say, "Oh, dude, you forgot to charge your jet bike, your jump pack dudes. Come on, crack on, charge them," because that's what they would do. There is that caveat, obviously, of if you've gone 3 turns down the line, you can't go back 3 turns and resolve something. And sometimes some people need to forget stuff for it to solidify in their head that they need to remember it. But this event, so it's a long-winded way, but this event seemed to epitomise that aspect of gaming, and I was really happy with that. And I think it's something that I want to try and push, and I want myself and the people I know who I'm friends with, who would agree with me. I think we should be trying to be proactive in our sportsmanship. And I would like to think that listeners of this show would agree with that. I mean, if you don't, if you think that I've got something wrong here, then please feel free to message in and let me know and provide a counter argument. And maybe I'm missing something out, but I don't see what's wrong with this. There's ways, if someone makes a big mistake by shooting the wrong target and then realizes it, do you let them go back on that? Maybe not, unless again it's that kind of, oh, you can't hurt it because I didn't tell you this piece of information. If someone did that, I'd be like, okay, take it back, do something else, because you wouldn't have done it had you had that information. But yeah, there's a line, and that line is always a little bit grey. That's fine, but I think the answer of I don't want to win that way. If you can ask yourself, if you feel like that is being broken, actually no. If my opponent does this and I know that he's misunderstood something, then actually I don't want to win that way. If you can answer that query like that, then maybe you should intervene and say, because you know what, maybe they'll do it. I've had games of Warhammer back in the day where I've been playing, guys said, you really should probably be targeting this unit. This unit's my really powerful unit. The unit you are going to target it can do this and this and this. It's basically not going to play much part in the game apart from hanging around, and therefore will need to be killed at some point, but immediately it's not a threat. That person still wanted to fire at that unit. I'm not going to say no, because that's what they want to do, but I feel that I've given them all the information. I've been honest and upfront, and they can make an informed choice. So I'm not cheating them even by omission, as it were. I've put that bit in here. I was trying to work out of a way of having that as a topic all of its own, but it felt like it fitted with the event, and I'm proud of that. My wife was sat with me, and she, at various points, she doesn't know. She knows a handful of these guys at these events, that mainly from Blood and Glory, meeting them, a couple from Weekenders. But she actually commented a number of times on how nice everyone was, and that doesn't always happen either. So I think anyone who's come to that event can feel proud in the way they've behaved, comported themselves. I hope that kind of made sense. It kind of went off into that tangent, but I feel it's important that we recognise that. I really do. So I think this was the least well run of the events I've done. I said it to a couple of people. If it was fine, it was okay, and okay isn't good enough, really. I think everyone had fun, and we tried to encourage that. And had it been more numbers, it could have been a bit of a problem, but it wasn't, and it was cool. However, if that's the way I'm going to run events in the future, then I don't want to run them. I want them to be better. I think the first part in that is getting more people to help, because I take it all on myself and I've got a lot less time, and that certainly was an aspect in this event not being quite where I wanted it to be. I talked about it on the show. My job's changed. Life's got a bit more hectic with other stuff as well, and I've got a lot less time than I used to have. So just on that fact, I need to get someone in to help me out, at least one person for any events I run. Additionally, I think just getting an extra person on top of that, I would like to have a team of 3 to run an event that I would want to be 50, 60 players kind of next year. I would hope that we can get that number. And I think I've already asked one person, and we're going to have to chat about that. I'm looking for the second person, and it's something to ask, giving up your weekend to go and watch people play a game. You might not play. We had Rob come out, and I say again, a big thank you to Rob, stepped in as spare player. but there is a chance that he didn't play any games over that weekend, and he's come to help me out. And he didn't pay, didn't charge him anything for it, and I gave him a room and food for the thing, but he still gave up a bank holiday weekend on a very sunny weekend where he could have been doing other stuff, or he could have been attending the event himself. So, I think having two more people, it's going to be tricky to get the right people, but looking forward to next year, and I've already sent the email off to ask about dates for next year. I hope we can go better, much bigger. And I've got some ideas floating around in my head. Some might work, some might not work, but I'm looking at new things we can do as well. It's kind of exciting, but also kind of a little bit trepidatious about getting everything in place first. Because at the end of the day, I'm providing a service, so it needs to live up to what people are paying, spending on travel and hotels and everything else. And I think I'm going to use Firestorm again because I love Cardiff. I think it's really good. We didn't actually go out that big. We didn't go out big at all on the Friday or Saturday night, but they had Pride on as well. It happened to be the weekend when they had Pride, so kind of avoided getting the two busier parts of town. Get the right date next year, and maybe we can have a bit more of a night out. It's always great to hang around in the bar and chat after the games. So, yeah, I think that's most of Dalaan Prime. We will probably go through some of the awards. I will say, actually, as well, again, thank you. Before we go into the awards, Miles, Little Legend Studios, provided a number of brushes and some advice on how to use them, because some of them were slightly less common style of brushes. But he sponsored a number of the painting events. And again, dark, fantastic meals for the scenery for Zone Mortalis, which can also be used. You can buy roofs for it and use it in regular games as well. But let's jump in, and I do want to give a mention to the winners. With Miles from Little Legend Studios, giving out some awards, some prizes for the awards, should I say. We had a chat a little bit beforehand about what kind of awards he would want to sponsor. Obviously, some of the hobby ones was the answer. He gave us some brushes to hand out as spot prizes. We did that on the second day, which was quite cool. Always fun to give out silly little things. Always seems to generate some excitement. We have one brush that he asked me to hold back, which we'll talk about in a second. But we decided that where we were going to judge painting, so we had. That's how we do this. We had a single character prize, a vehicle prize, and we had the player voted best army, and in this case we let people put out as much as they wanted to the forces they use, and we had Miles voting for the best army, and then we had that was all the specific hobby prizes, where Miles and I where we looked at the vehicle and the single miniature, and even the army to a point. We didn't. It's hard to explain. So most of the time, painting awards go to the best technically painted, what have you, or sometimes it will go to the best overall when it comes to painting and theme and work done on the model, whether that's sculpting or kit bashing or what have you. But in general, when you go to these events, once a certain amount of events, you start seeing the same people at these events, and they're winning prizes all the time, and that's not inherently a bad thing. However, we wanted to mix things up, so we didn't have technical ability as our primary kind of judging method. We wanted to reward ideas and effort and everything as well. Now, that might mean that we had picked the best technically painted model, but we wanted to have a little look round and be able to offer something which doesn't necessarily limit who can win it, is one thing, but also can reward people who maybe don't get those rewards you would normally see in our the awards we give out. We have titles for, so it's not like it says best in there. And when I asked people to vote for the army they wanted to vote for, it was whatever value of best you want to attribute. So whether that's makeup of the army, say cool conversions, nice thematic ideas, any of that kind of thing could be best. I always feel, I think I've said this before, I've always feel when people have best painted, I'm not actually qualified to judge what is best painted. So, I pick, even if I vote for what I think is the best painted, I might be missing out on the subtleties of another army, that kind of thing. But that's the way we did ours. We just wanted to mix it up as much as anything else. The one award we had extra was basically Miles had a brush called the Eradicator. And so he said to me, can we give this out to the person who scores lots of victory points? And I'm like, well, I'm not actually keeping an individual track of victory points. So we couldn't do that. But we did both have an army that we'd mentioned for various bits and pieces that fit the title quite well, actually, I think. And it was one of the armies that we wanted to reward. It's exactly the kind of thing we were thinking of when we were talking about what we were judging based on. But we've only got so many awards, we can only give so many out. And we hadn't decided on one for this army. So the Eradicator went to Dan Palfrey's Demon Army. So this is the Malau Demon Army you may have seen online. Other people will do Malau stuff. There were models taken from various ranges, from Reaper Bones, I believe, some converted Games Workshop stuff, and the overall effect of the army was really cool. The army was cool. It was something that we haven't seen huge amounts of demons yet that I've been to events and seen. So it was nice and refreshing and had a theme and everything else, and Dan played it and seemed to have good fun with everyone who was playing as well. So he got that. In terms of single miniature, the Maestro Award, we had 2 or 3 options, and Miles had said one that I'd seen, and again it was quite it wasn't the most extravagant conversion, but it was well painted, and it was one of those ones that Matt Woodsmith was there with his World Eaters, and quite frankly, it could be really easy to just pick Matt for a few of these awards, and not just him. There, Miles obviously wasn't allowed to win an award because he was voting on it and giving awards out. Otherwise, he might have done quite well. There were a few others, really nicely painted stuff. But Jason Bates had this Iron Warriors character who had a whip taken from another GW model. I can't think for the life of me. I think it might be the Escher one from Necromunda. And it was well executed. It fit really well. There was some real dynamism. I can't say that word. It's gone out of my head. I won't try again. Some real movement in that model for an Iron Warriors model as well, and that was really nice to see. And it was really cool. I don't think it was on the table for the last game either. I had to kind of go along and pick it out of his case and have a good look at it. But yeah, that was really cool. We then did a best vehicle, a vehicle. And again, there were a number of options here. Pete Reese had a number of vehicles on show for his White Scars, and again, he's another one of those guys. That army looks really good. He will tell you that there are better painting stuff, but it works really well. But we gave it to Ross Daly because he had I'm going to remember now. I'm going to get the wrong one. It was a Falchion? Was it a Glaive? Can never remember. My mind's gone blank. I'm doing this a few days after, so I do apologise. It was super heavy, and it was cool. And it was well executed. Miles really liked the heating effects. He pushed for this one, which is good to see. It's coming from someone who knows what they're talking about. My limited painting ability, but yeah, it was really cool. I think you can probably see it in some of the photos. Actually, it was the Imperial Fists one, if I remember correctly. I should have done more prep. The Artificer Award. So this was the army voting, and we mentioned Pete a second ago, and this was voted for by Miles, and this was one of a couple, and Pete got it. Pete's White Scars, you might have seen them online there. In fact, when Andy Hoare did his White Scars bit on Warhammer TV. I believe they use Pete's stuff for photos on that, and they're fantastic. They work really well. They're, everything's of a good standard as well. There's a lot of stuff there. Pete's stuff's, really good. We did have some honourable mentions for some of these as well. And Matt, that was for the next one. So, Matt's Adeptus Titanicus was like a close second on this one, which we took that as a kind of separate force for this. His Legio Furians are fantastic. If you want to see pictures of them, they're all over the Full Stride podcast Facebook page and Twitter. I think, again, we did have good pictures of them up because they played 3 games of Adeptus Titanicus over the weekend. Now, the players' vote went for one of those other armies that I wanted to pick. I wanted to give an award for the army, but it was a case of let's see what happens, and then it might not get an award, but I really wanted to, and luckily it got voted by the players, and it was Ben Lamble, and he had a full-on, well, not quite a full-on Sisters and Silence army because it's really hard to max out the points in that, but he had 6 of the Karen Acquisitors, the tanks, and he had, I think he had 3 Venatari and a Telemon. It was something like that, but the rest of it was Sisters, Janisha Kroll, and loads of Sisters, and it was painted really well. It looked fantastic on the table. I think his vehicles, I think I overheard him saying that he basically sprayed silver and then just layers and layers of washes over the top to get a black effect, which was, not normal, not the way that most people would go about it. It was a really fantastic army. Really liked that. And then best sports, we had within the first 7, 8 votes, we were like, okay, this has been decided. Someone's got 3 already. The chances are if they get one more, it's theirs. And sure enough, they got one more straight away. So we got to the point of almost writing the name straight onto it. But no, we'll wait, because you never know. And sure enough, someone else came on and got 4 out of 5 votes as well. So Jason Bates and Jacques Leneuse. I apologised on the day. Didn't quite. I know he's told me how to pronounce it. He wasn't too precious about it either. But it was one of those newer guys on the scene as well, which was really nice. 2 guys getting 4 votes. Lots of people getting a vote. Obviously, we only did 1 vote at this event each, and the rest were really spread out, which is always good to see. And, even then, the people didn't get one. Doesn't mean they were bad games. As I said earlier in the thing, there wasn't that vibe from anyone throughout the whole event. But it's always good to see. And I could tell that Jason was probably going to win one just from walking around, just from the way people were acting on that table. It seemed like a really fun environment to be playing in. And then we had the Iconoclast and the Emperor's Champion. So these are given out to people who embody the Horus Heresy the most kind of over the weekend, or we believe the most. So this is having an army that looks well represented, playing the game the right way, having sometimes it's lists, sometimes it's specific things, whether they've helped out. It's whatever. It's purposely left really vague, but basically it's whoever we see as an organiser's perspective, we see really embracing what we value in the hobby, in this particular part of the hobby as well. So on the traitor side, a special mention to Aaron Tunney, who always turns up. He's always great at all these events. Big smile on his face. Had good fun. Not necessarily doing that well sometimes with his army, but really good fun. But the winner went to Aaron Osborne. And this was the gentleman with the Emperor's Children jet bike army, which sometimes could be a problem. But he was a guy who was, again, players were enjoying the games, as far as I'm aware. The ones I saw did anyway. But also, just walking around the event was always talking to someone, and quite often not someone he came up with or knew or what have you. And it wasn't forced or anything like that. It was really welcoming. Every time there was a kind of something going on, like with the scenario that didn't work, they just changed it, got on with it, worked out something that worked between them. All those things. It was a real, these awards are for people who are a real pleasure to be there. If we could give out 20 odd awards, we probably would, but we have to pick one or two. You know, that's just the nature of the beast. So well done, Aaron. And then on the loyalist side of thing with the Emperor's Champion, we had Marcus, who hasn't been to many events, was challenging people to games, you know, some quite good players as well, was keen to play different systems, was keen to get involved, came out with us on the Friday night, and really, again, so I think, and forgive me, Marcus, if I'm wrong, I think it was the first event, proper event, but jumped into it, and that's not always easy to do, but really is someone that I can see being a benefit for the community. So, real nice, you know, came a close second there to Murray. But again, one of the new guys, I think he came out with Jacques, looked completely shocked and surprised to get this, to get the award. And it wasn't till, it was as I was starting to think halfway through the last game, and I saw him on his table and he was having a right laugh, and things weren't, I don't know, I think it was the last game, things weren't necessarily going that great, but he's enjoying it. Being welcome and opening again and helping things along. And I suddenly realised, actually, every time I've seen him around the event is the same. And again, you wouldn't have known that he wasn't part of that kind of community. And that doesn't necessarily mean, because sometimes that can come across as a clique, but it certainly wasn't exclusive in that. You know, it wasn't like, oh, he fits in, he's one of us. It was, no, it just getting on with things, smoothing things, making things work, big smile on the face, always seemed to be having a good time, and to that expressing that he's having a good time as well, which allows other people to do it, you know what I mean? And we don't always give awards for that kind of thing. When you come to an event that I run, that I'm doing these awards, you don't always have to be that one to win this award. You don't have to be out there giving it the big one. We do see from the other side of the table, from the organiser's point, you see when someone's actually doing good things and maybe not, they're a bit quieter or what have you. You do see that. But in this case, these two people were those slightly more outgoing, or seemed it anyway from our side. And Murray was a pleasure to have, and I hope they come again. And there was a number of new people at this event. It was hard to choose some of these winners, which is always good to see. And I really hope that we get to see some of those little groups coming to more events and getting into that scene, because you're always going to lose the odd one as we go on. We need to be bringing more people in. We talk about that on the show from the hobby point. We also need that with independent events as well. So that was a brief rundown on the winners of those events. It was good. It was really good, and I say we gave out some awards, some brushes through the event as well, and Miles has offered his services because some of those brushes were non-standard. I must admit, I was giving some out. I said, if you want to know how to use it, then you probably should talk to Miles. So, but it was good, and something I think again for future events, I want to improve on what we give out. I don't want to focus on what we give out. There are events out there which give out lots of stuff, and that's great. But I don't want people to be thinking, oh, I can try and win that. That's, I don't want people to be nice to people because they want to win a prize from Forge World or something. I want them to be nice to people because they want to be nice to people. So, and not that you can't do the same, but you know what I mean. But anyway, I think that will do. We will be coming back. I started to work on a few ideas. I'm starting to work on dates, and we'll probably move it a little bit further forwards in the year to avoid the problem with Cardiff is you've really got to avoid all the events if possible. What we will do is we will get dates out as quick as I can in plenty of time. Probably a pack out, hopefully, fingers crossed, in plenty of time as well. But the dates certainly, so that if you want to book a hotel room and there is an event that goes on, because I probably go up before rugby fixtures are announced, something like that. If I get the dates up before a rugby fixture is announced, then the hotels are still cheap. Once the rugby fixture is announced, hotels go up. So keep an eye out for that. But I'll let you all know. But yeah, we'll close off there and come back to close the show out. And thank you for making it to the end of another episode of The Imperial Truth. Hopefully it sounded a little bit better for you. Please let me know how it came across on your side of things, because every device, listening in different places, listening in the car particularly, can be a very different experience from listening through my headphones or via my computer. So yeah, please feel free to feedback on that. You can feedback anyway about anything. Greg at theimperialtruth.com. You can come and follow me and the show on Twitter, imperial_truth, or at Child of Fang, and at Child of Fang on Instagram. And then we've got the Facebook groups as well. I'm going to make this pretty short and sweet in the outro. We also have the Patreon if you wish to come and support us there, or of course you can order via Element Games as well. Another quick reminder, the Blood and Glory tickets are up, and all the other tickets, fingers crossed, will be going up fairly soon as well. It should be a real fun time. It's a fantastic venue. Really enjoyed the last couple of years doing that, and Mrs. Truth will be there again helping out this year. I need to get on my laptop and play with it and make sure it's all working, so I don't have some of the issues I had at the Reckoning of Dalaan Prime. I'm going to keep this very short and sweet so I can get edited and out in the same night, and hopefully, you never know, even get on with some painting so I can be ready for heading up to Durham. I'm not 100% sure what we've got on next week, still trying to organise a few things, and then after that we'll have a bit of a wrap up from Company of Legends. If you've got any ideas, any thoughts, any questions you want to ask, again, feel free, Greg at theimperialtruth.com. All the feedback's welcome, and if you're constructive with any criticism you have, and you mean it in a way that's designed to help the show be better, then absolutely feel free to send it in. I had a couple of people who are a little bit apprehensive, and I completely understandably, in the last week or so, when they've been messaging in with some ideas and some thoughts, and I appreciate that it's not always the easiest thing to do, but anything, as I say, constructive is welcome. So I'm going to leave it there. It's been a shorter episode, but hopefully there's been some interesting things in there for you to think about. There's certainly stuff I'm still thinking about. But until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.